Hello music lovers, welcome to the channel and thanks so much for stopping by to check out this video. In this one, I'm going to be talking about the Cars, Ric Ocasek, Ben Orr, and sadly we lost Ric Ocasek. This is a tribute to Ric, a tribute to Ben, a tribute to the band The Cars because officially I think they have been parked. There had been some speculation, maybe the Cars were going to do something again, possibly if Ric decided he wanted to write some more songs, but now we can safely say the Cars are over. And it's kind of came out of nowhere. It seems like lately there's been a lot of people passing away, and it's not always people you know either. There's somebody you may have heard of, or maybe somebody from a band that you may have heard of, but you're not really familiar with them. It seems like on a regular basis, more and more people are leaving. And, it's quite shocking with Ric Ocasek. With Ben Orr, we knew that he had cancer. We knew that there was something wrong, and it's just a matter of time. With Ric Ocasek, it was a whole different story. Ric, even his wife, Paulina Porizkova, she said that it was shocking. And we had no idea that he had heart disease. We had no idea that he just had heart surgery. Not that we as the fans are entitled to know this kind of stuff, but it just goes to show you how anything can happen with these guys. And so I want to give a tribute in this video to Ric Ocasek and to Ben Orr and to the Cars. We're going to look at Ric's final night as told by Paulina, and we're also going to look at the friendship that Ric had with Ben that led to the Cars eventually, and we're going to take a look at some highlights from their career and some of the side projects. And I never got to meet Ric. Almost got to meet Ben. I did get to meet and spend a good deal of time with Elliot Easton and Greg Hawkes, and I'll be talking about that much later on. So sit back, relax, strap yourselves in. We'll laugh, we'll cry, and we'll let the good times roll as we take a look back at the Cars. Okay, so I remember back in the 80s just being in love with Paulina Porizkova, the supermodel. She was on the front cover of the only issue of Sports Illustrated that I read, the swimsuit one. And then you had her on the front cover of many other magazines too, and she was just gorgeous. And when I found out that she was marrying Ric Ocasek of the Cars, it was like, and I'm sure some of you may remember this, it was like, really? Because he was this real tall guy, looked like from another planet or something. But it just goes to show you, and I've come to realize this over many years, that women, they tend to see things below the surface that maybe guys don't appreciate right away. As a matter of fact, she wrote this beautiful article or letter, I guess you could say, to the fans, kind of explaining, how she felt about Ric, what he meant to her, and how she came to find him that morning that he passed away. And it's really a heartbreaking letter that she wrote. And I'm going to share with you a couple of bits from it. But she talked about Ric and how he could be a bit deceiving in terms of his looks. So she writes in this letter, "I always said Ric looked like an upside down exclamation mark. A lot of people found that really forbidding and found him intimidating, but he had an incredible gentleness about him when you got to know him. If he pushed his sunglasses onto the bridge of his nose and you saw his turquoise eyes, people would know. He had the most beautiful colored eyes, which really surprised people because people often did not see his eyes. And when he looked at you and smiled, it was like, oh my God, he smiled at me, the sun came out, it's amazing." And actually, Paulina met Ric Ocasek on the set of a Cars video. They met on the set of Drive, their great, actually their biggest hit from the Heartbeat City album. And Ric Ocasek even said he was glad that Ben Orr sang that song because it kind of freed him up to hang out with Paulina. They wound up getting married a few years later. And they were married for nearly 30 years. Recently, they separated. And I'm not exactly clear why, but that's a shame that had to go on while he was dealing with health issues. I'm not sure what's going on there, but she recounts the morning that she found him. And it's really, like I said, this is a heartbreaking article. I'm going to link it down below so you can read it for yourself. But she basically says, she went to go bring him something, and she, felt that he was cold, felt like marble. And he hadn't moved actually from where he was the night before when she had left him, and she knew something was up. And she also talks about how You know, she didn't want to make the call right away to 911, and she wrote about it. And she says, his manager warned me that as soon as you call 911, watch out, things will start to happen. So I didn't call 911 for a long time. He had died in the night, not at 4 or whatever they claim. That's when I put in the call to 911. I wanted Ric's sons to get here so we could all say goodbye to him. So we waited, and we got to circle the bed and hold hands and really say goodbye. We were here with his shape for many hours after his death. It was kind of wonderful because we all understood he was gone. He definitely left us. But the minute I called 911, literally 2 minutes after, there were paparazzi at our house. That's just disgusting. So yeah, she knew as soon as she called 911 that that was it. You know, that the paparazzi, TMZ, was going to be camped outside their house. This is the environment that we live in. This is the culture that we have now. And this is, you know, it kind of ties into what's going on with Eddie Van Halen. And there's lots of rumors going on about his health. You know, he's got cancer, he's going for treatments, is he near death? His son Wolfie had to put out some photos just to show that his dad wasn't on his deathbed. You know, he went to a Tool concert, he went to go buy a new car. This is the kind of stuff that you have to do because people go crazy. And I'll be getting to Van Halen in an upcoming video, so stay tuned for that one. And in this article, Paulina also talked about how, you know, Ric was really affected by the death of Ben Orr, who was the other lead singer in the Cars. And Ben was somebody that Ric had known since they were practically teenagers, you know, and they formed a lot of bands together. Every band that Ric was in, Ben was right there with him. You know, they started off with this band called Milkwood, which was like a Crosby, Stills and Nash kind of band, very indicative of the times, you know, the early 70s. Then it moved into this band called Richard and the Rabbits, which I think had Greg Hawkes. So he started coming on the scene. And then it became just a duo, Ocasek and Orr. They did some kind of an acoustic country flavored kind of thing. And then it led into Captain Swing, which was this band that I think Elliot Easton was also in. So he started forming these various bands that were kind of tapping into what was going at that particular time during the 70s. And by the time he got to 1976, he knew what he wanted to do. Captain Swing became the Cars, and he knew who he wanted to work with. He brought in Greg Hawkes. He kept Elliot Easton. Of course, he had Ben Orr. He brought in David Robinson, who had been doing drums in this other band locally. This was a band that Ric Ocasek drove. You know, he wrote all the songs. He was the director of the band, but he did allow them to kind of bring in their own things so that the band had a very unique sound. It wasn't all about Ric when you get down to it, and I'll be talking a little bit more about that later. Now, one of the interesting things about the Cars and how they got started is that around 1976, 77, they were working on demos for what would become their debut album. And their demos were getting played on the radio, this radio station in Boston. I think it was Ric that was friends with somebody there. They actually played demos on the radio, which is like unheard of because Boston is a major, major market. And, you know, I have worked in stations that were smaller markets, and I know that they always look to the big markets to see what the big boys are playing so they can figure out what they want to play. You know, what's the hot hits coming out of New York and Boston? And so here is this radio station out of Boston playing these demos from a band that doesn't even have a record label. As a matter of fact, when they had to report to the major trade magazines what they were playing, you know, most of the time it would be like, you know, Bruce Springsteen, Columbia Records, you know, so-and-so on this label. The Cars, it just said tape. Like there was no record label. They eventually changed that though. The Cars got themselves a record deal. They hooked up with Roy Thomas Baker, who had produced, you know, a minor hit with Bohemian Rhapsody from Queen. And so they had him to produce the album. The Cars' first album was like a greatest hits album. You know, Just What I Needed, My Best Friend's Girl, Bye Bye Love, you know, Let the Good Times Roll, Moving in Stereo. So many great songs on that debut album. And not many bands get to put out a debut that's like a greatest hits. And also not many bands get to put out an album like that and then keep on getting better and have bigger albums, you know. Many bands, you know, have that kind of success and they're one and done, but the Cars, you know, and it's also because of the environment that they were in the 70s. The record labels were just more into taking a band and allowing them to kind of grow. We don't really get a whole lot of that nowadays. And something else interesting about the Cars were their album covers. You know, for the most part, they had a lot of women featured on their album covers. And I recall Ric Ocasek in this interview talking about the sperm-covered steering wheel on the first album. And this was something that they did not have planned. This was not something that they wanted. They had no idea what the album cover was actually going to be. Actually, the album cover that they had originally come up with was not accepted, I think because it had some issues with copyrights or something. And so the record label put the woman behind the wheel, and Ric Ocasek and the guys kind of saw it, or at least Rick did, saw it as kind of like a subliminal thing. Kind of reminded me of, like, remember those Camel cigarette ads? You know, the subliminal advertising, like, you know, is that a camel or are you happy to see me? You know what I'm talking about? Although nowadays the advertisements are maybe not quite as subtle, but they try. Anyway, my favorite era of the Cars has got to be their first couple of albums, you know, the debut and Candio. Love Candio. I think most of their best stuff is locked up in the first couple of albums, honestly. You know, the debut we already talked about, but the title track to Candio is great with Ben Orr. You got Let's Go. There's also Night Spots and Dangerous Type. Let me know what your favorite Cars albums are. Drop them down below. And then, of course, we can't forget the album Heartbeat City, which was a huge album for them, probably their biggest seller. And that's the one where they brought in Robert Mutt Lange, who had produced Foreigner 4, Back in Black by AC/DC. He also worked with Def Leppard on Pyromania, and he went on to produce a Hysteria album too. So this guy's got a great track record. They bring him in. The hits are just coming off this album like crazy. This is where they got Drive, you know, huge. I think it went to number 3. That's where Rick met his future wife. Rick, I don't think, was so happy with the album looking back. I think he felt the album was a little bit too shiny and too poppy. And I think David Robinson, the drummer, liked working with Mutt. And it's because there weren't, I don't think, any drums on that album. Like, there was a lot of drum machines, but I don't know that David Robinson really played drums on that album a whole lot, if at all. They also had a video for You Might Think, which was a huge video for them. It actually won the first MTV Music Video Award, and it beat out Thriller. Yeah, I mean, I was shocked. My eyes were bugging out too. How do you beat Thriller? I mean, Thriller was a groundbreaking video in so many ways, you know, because you have to keep in mind at this time, people still weren't sure what to do with the music video format. You know, you had a lot of stupid ass videos going on. You also had these big filmmakers who were starting to dip their toe into making videos, and that's the case with Thriller. Thriller also broke down cultural boundaries, like racial boundaries. But no, we're going to give it to You Might Think, which, you know, had Ric Ocasek looking like King Kong. We had him swatting digital flies, and it was just bizarre. But then again, we're talking about MTV here. This isn't the Nobel Peace Prize. And of course, you know, speaking of producers, Rick was a great producer himself. You know, he, outside of the Cars, he produced bands like Weezer. There are 2 huge albums, the Blue Album and the Green Album. You know, the one that's the Blue Album had Buddy Holly on it, huge song, great track. And the Green one had Hash Pipe. And he also went on to produce, you know, one of my favorite songs from the 80s by Romeo Void, Never Say Never. Have you ever heard that song? If you haven't, you gotta check it out. Never Say Never is an awesome song. And when you listen to it, you could say, yeah, this does have a bit of a Cars kind of a vibe to it. So I'm going to make a playlist for you to check out. I'll throw a link up to it with a lot of the music and things I'm talking about, kind of like the soundtrack to this video. Check it out, all right? Also, Rick was an artist. He liked to draw and paint, and he had his works of art featured in galleries, and he also did something shortly before he passed away that his family shared with the public recently. And you know, Rick was such an artist that he decided to blow up the very band that he had been working with for the past, 10 years or so at that point. 1987, he decided to break up the Cars, and he just wanted to do things that kind of went outside of the realm of the Cars. He didn't want to go too crazy, but he wanted to get a bit more esoteric, and he wanted to do things that just did not fit under the Cars banner. Wanted to make some solo albums. And this was shocking to his band members, especially Elliot Easton. You know, he really was not prepared for this kind of a change. And that's one of the downsides of being in a band where one guy writes everything, is that, you know, when he decides to close shop, to park the car, that's it. There's no more rides. And, you know, Ric just wanted to do something else. And of course, you know, as the years went on, there was a lot of speculation, always being asked, will there be another Cars album? And Ric didn't like to perform live. He hated to perform live. He wasn't one of these guys that was like, hello, Cleveland, and talk to the audience. I don't think he talked to the audience much at all. And that's how the band were. But then around 2011, Ric had some songs that he had written that he thought felt the Cars very, very well. And so he wanted to make a new album. And so the Cars made their first album without Ben Orr. It was called Move Like This, and it had some cool stuff on it. It actually was a pretty strong album. Blue Tip, Sad Song, great tracks from that album. Free is another one. They went on tour, although it wasn't a very long tour. I think it was about 10, 11 dates or something, and it was done. It was very, very quick. Like I said, Ric, not too hype on going out on the road and playing live. And, you know, even though it was a short-lived affair, it was great to see Elliot Easton out there again, you know. And one of the things that I'm reminded of is how Elliot Easton had these great guitar solos, so memorable. I think the most memorable guitar solos in top 40 history, that award's got to go to Elliot Easton. He had just had this way of, you know, he didn't go on and do these wanker-type solos. They were short, sweet, they made sense, they were tasteful, they had melodies. And, you know, you go back and think about songs like Best Friend's Girl, you know, which is from the debut album. Nice rockabilly style guitar solo there, you know. When I think of the Cars and their best songs, it's funny, I don't think about Heartbeat City, even though it was their biggest seller. I think about the debut album and, you know, Just What I Needed and Moving in Stereo and Bye Bye Love. Those kind of pop out to me, you know. And I'm also reminded of this detour that the Cars took around 2005. This was during a phase where, you know, Ric Ocasek was still not very keen on doing anything new with the Cars. They hadn't done anything since like 1987 or so. But Elliot Easton and Greg Hawkes wanted to go out and do something. And so with Ric's blessing, Elliot and Greg formed this new band called the New Cars, along with Todd Rundgren. Remember that? And they put out a live album, and they basically went out and played a bunch of Cars stuff. They had a couple of brand new things on there too, but it really was a Cars tribute. And on paper, it looked kind of curious, but when you heard it, it was like, yeah, Rundgren totally sounds like he's in the wheelhouse for Ric Ocasek, which you can't say that about hardly anybody. I mean, Ric Ocasek was a unique singer, and nobody else sounded like him. But Todd, I thought, did a really good job sounding not only like Ric, but he did a great job doing the Ben songs too. And that kind of reminds me too about Ric Ocasek and how, even though he drove the Cars, he wrote everything. He allowed the other guys to do their thing. You know, he allowed Elliot Easton to do his great solos. He brought in Ben Orr to sing the songs that required the better vocalist. You know, he thought that Ben Orr was a great singer. And for any song that needed a really good vocal, that was Ben's, you know. And Greg Hawkes on keyboards. I mean, you want to talk about keyboard sounds that are memorable. It's not just about Elliot Easton, but Greg Hawkes had really memorable keyboard parts in all these great songs. And so Ric allowed everybody to put their 2 cents in and shine, even though he wrote everything. And I always thought that was really, really cool. And certainly one of the most memorable things I ever saw having to do with the Cars was the final band interview that they did around 2000 with Ben Orr, a part of it. Now at this point, Ben Orr, you know, he was diagnosed with cancer, pancreatic cancer, in 2000. And that didn't stop him from taking part in this interview with the rest of the band. It was filmed for a DVD that came out shortly after Ben passed away. And the interview was just an amazing interview. It's like an hour long. They're all sitting there talking, reminiscing about the old times. You can tell that Ric, you know, because Ric and Ben had a falling out at one point around 1987 when the band, you know, went away. I think there was some strain going on between Ben and Rick, some stuff that had gone on for quite a while. I had heard that Ben wanted more of his songs featured, or wanted some of his songs featured on Cars albums, and Rick really wasn't having it, and there might have been some other things going on there too, and they were estranged for quite a while. They didn't talk to each other for many years. I don't think they really talked to each other again until Ben got sick. And you could tell that Rick loved Ben, and you know, they kind of buried the hatchet considering what was going on with Ben's health. You know, he went downhill pretty quick. And I'm going to put a link to that interview down below so you can check it out, all right? And so this kind of ties in with what I talked about earlier, how I almost got to meet Ben Orr and interview him. Basically, and I talked about this briefly in my video that I did about Dennis DeYoung of Styx, where I went to go see Styx in 1999 up in New York, and the opening band comes out, this band called Big People, and little did I know they were this supergroup that was, you know, not only Ben Orr, but you had Liberty DeVito, the drummer from Billy Joel's band. You had Jeff Carlisi from 38 Special, Derek St. Holmes from Ted Nugent's band, Pat Travers, and they played, you know, car songs, and they played 38 Special and Pat Travers, and it was an amazing show, great, great band. And so the friend that I was with at that time, who was in radio, set up the interview with Ben Orr, because he was blown away, huge Cars fan. And so the interview was on track. And then we heard not long after that Ben had cancer. And within a year, Ben was gone. And so what a shame. You know, Ric Ocasek was shocked by it. He was really affected. You know, as I had talked about earlier, he even wrote a song about Ben on one of his solo albums called Nexterday, a tune called Silver. You know, and when you look at the lyrics to this song, you know, you can really see truly how Rick felt about Ben, his friend of so many years, how he really deep down missed him. You know, very, very sad. Heartbreak City, guys. So this leads into how I eventually got to meet Elliot Easton and Greg Hawkes. The friend of mine who set up the interview with Ben Orr, he stayed in touch with Ben Orr's widow. And eventually 2014-15 rolls around, and he gets in touch with her about finishing this song that Ben Orr had written called Open Your Eyes. And so basically it was determined that, you know, Elliot Easton and Greg Hawkes would be invited to come play on it. This was all happening in Nashville. I happened to be living there at that time, and I was invited to kind of go down to the session, just kind of hang out, be a fly on the wall. There were others there too. It was held at Dark Horse Studio in Nashville. And let me tell you something, this is one of the most gorgeous studios I've ever seen. Love the wood stuff going on. Even the kitchen was fucking killer. I mean, this place had it going on. It was awesome. So anyway, I get down to the session, and Elliot and Greg have not gotten there yet, but John J.R. Robinson is there. He's on drums. And if you don't know who J.R. Robinson is, he is the most recorded drummer in history. That's his thing. This guy has played on all kinds of great stuff. I mean, he played on Off the Wall by Michael Jackson. He played drums on We Are the World, All Night Long by Lionel Richie, John Fogerty's Center Field, Eric Clapton, Changed the World, David Lee Roth, remember his first solo album, Just a Gigolo, California Girls, played drums on that. Back in the High Life album by Steve Winwood, played on that album. Shaka Khan, Ain't Nobody, remember that song with her and Rufus? Played on that, played on all, I'm just scratching the surface. JR was a great guy, very, very friendly, and he's a first-class drummer. These are the types of guys that you never hear about, and it's a shame. They do a lot of the dirty work, but they don't get the accolades that they deserve. Someone else who was at this recording session was Deon Estus. He's a legendary bass player. He played with George Michael and Wham. Remember that band that George Michael had with Andrew Ridgeley? Played with him. He also played on George Michael's first couple of solo albums. And I was one of the ones that went to go pick up Deon at the airport. And I remember on the ride from the airport back to the studio, Deon was talking about how he was going to be joining George Michael the following year as part of his comeback. This would have been 2016. And unfortunately, George Michael committed suicide. He died on Christmas Day, 2016. I mean, this is, you want to talk about more Heartbreak City. This is just, you can't make this shit up, folks. So overall, this was just a really cool day. I'm so glad I was able to be a part of it and meeting all these great legends. And, after everything was all wrapped up, we went to downtown Nashville and all went out for dinner. Greg Hawkes was more of a quiet kind of guy. Elliot Easton too, although he liked to tell stories. And I also remember that this is when the Cars were nominated for the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame for the very first time. I congratulated them on that. Even though they didn't get into the Hall of Fame that particular year, it was the first time that they had been mentioned. And I asked Elliot if the Cars were ever going to do anything again. Of course, this is after the reunion from 2011. And, he was basically just like, look, it's up to Rick. Rick drives the car. And so whenever Rick wants to do something, then that's when we'll do something. But of course, that never happened, unfortunately. Elliot Easton has since gone on, formed this band called the Empty Hearts. I think they're just getting ready to drop their second album. It's a supergroup, another supergroup that has come out of the Cars. He's playing with Clem Burke of Blondie, Wally Palmer of the Romantics, and some other guys too. Greg Hawkes and David Robinson. David Robinson, I think, is looking for a razor. David actually, I think, is more or less a retired guy now. He has like an art gallery. I think he makes jewelry and sells it himself. Greg Hawkes is just like a session guy, plays with Todd Rundgren, tours with him. So in kind of wrapping this all up, thank you, Ric Ocasek, Ben Orr, and the Cars for taking us on a drive for so many years and into so many new directions. And we really loved it. We loved the ride. Let me know what you guys think. Leave your comments below. As with any video, this video may be over, but the conversation continues below. Drop your comments. Let me know what you think. More videos are on the way, all right? So stay tuned, and I'll be talking to you soon.